Today, it's right about time that I build the carriages for my steam train. I built this train last week, but I didn't build any carriages to go with it, so now I've built these modular carriages that can work as carriages or just as flatbeds. And you see the roof can come off, so you can play in the interior, or you can take off the entire thing and make it just a flatbed. And using old scattered terrain that I've built, as well as a new cannon that I've built that will come up soon. So the base of my carriage is going to start off with some chipboard pieces. I cut these at 12 inches by 3 inches, which is roughly the size of a train carriage, scaled down real far down to being D&D size. So this is roughly 60 foot by 15 foot, which is a little smaller than a normal size carriage, but a little larger than some other carriages. So I then cut a bunch of popsicle sticks down to 3 inches wide, and I'm going to glue those onto all of the flatbeds. And this gives it just an real easy texture onto the chipboard. When I'm laying these down, my idea was to work from both sides at once and meet in the middle, and hopefully just place one popsicle stick and it would be perfect and it would fit, and it didn't, so I had to shuffle them all back and forth to make it fit and not look weird, but it didn't. As long as there's a little bit of gap, you can pick up some texture with some dry brushing later on. Now, to make the carriages sit in and not wobble around and fall off, I cut some more pieces of popsicle stick and I just lay them along the edges with a hefty amount of space above. That way there's a little lip for anything to catch on. I then get to work on the carriages. I'm using foam core here just because it's easy to cut some weird shapes into, but you could also use some cardboard as well. So I start by measuring out, I think 2.5 inches is a good height for this. With my little miniature to the side, it kind of matched. So I measure 4 walls, 2.5 inches by 12 inches long. And I mark that all out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the details onto it first before I go cutting everything out. That way I can line all the details up. Because I wanted some rounded windows, I cut a little paper template, just using a piece of very large popsicle stick, and I'm just going to copy that onto all the walls. And this is roughly 2 inches, and I'm leaving a 1 inch space between them. At first, I mark on the doors, but instead of cutting them out, I decide to just glue on the wooden popsicle stick pieces as the doors. And then I cut some square pieces to go at the ends. These pieces will have to be a little bit less than 3 inches wide because they're going to go in between the two wall pieces. So measure the length of whatever wall material you're using and take that off 3 inches twice, and you'll get the size of the wall piece. Now at this stage, if you wanted to do any detailing on the inside, you should do it now, before you glue all of these walls together. I originally had an idea to perhaps put some wallpaper onto the walls, but once I glued these together, there was really no chance of doing that. And as I said before, I just take those jumbo popsicle sticks and glue them on as the door. I even add some smaller ones just to add a bit more detail. Eventually, I do end up going over these with my little gears as well, but I don't catch that on video. I then take those real weird thin popsicle sticks that I have, the coffee stir sticks that are way too thin, and I glue those along the edge as some sort of stripe or banding or something like that. If you didn't have something like this, you could just do that the same with some cardstock. I then cut some roof pieces as well, 3 inches by 12 inches, just like the floor, and then I cut some pieces off and I glue them on either end, and this should stop the roof from sliding off. Make sure to sit them right in the corners, otherwise it'll still slide. Because I wanted a bit of a bevel coming up the side of the roof, I marked 1/2 centimeter from either side, and then I'll just cut that along very carefully. The cuts are a bit rough, and if you cut really rough, you can cover it up with some popsicle sticks or some cardstock. It's time to then get started on the undercarriage. I cut several pieces of foam core here. 2 at 1/2 inch by 11 inches, those will be the sides. 2 at 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches, those will be the widths. And 1 by 11 inches by 2 inches, and that'll be the piece that goes on the bottom. And these pieces will slot together to create a small box into which we can drill our wheels, as well as stick any more details. Now the wheels I'm using here were 3D printed, so it's very important that 1/2 inch number, because that is the exact size of the wheel. It is exactly 1 inch, so it needs 1/2 inch clearance above it. I then measured the distance between the edge of the wheel and the center of the hole, and I put that onto the foam core, and I mark it on both sides and drill towards the center. By drilling from either side, you get a much straighter line than if you were to drill all the way through it from just one side. And then I'm just going to use some barbecue skewer to hold those in place and stick on the wheels. The file for these wheels will be in the description below. And the carriage is looking pretty close to being done, but there's one very important step. We need to fill all of the exposed foam areas with some spackle. This will stop any of the spray primer melting away the foam. It's also good to use to fill in any cracks and gaps anywhere else on the model. I thought the undercarriage was looking a bit bare, so I added some straws just as some greebly detail. This is like some sort of pipe or fuel pump or something. I don't know what would be underneath a train, but this can be it. Now it's time to get started on that giant siege cannon I got. I decided to cut a piece of PVC pipe. This is roughly like 5 inches or so. And then I'm going to cut a little platform. That way, when the carriages are off and it's just a flatbed, this platform can sit and slide into the groove that we have. So it's 3 inches by 3 inches. I'm just using some spare offcuts, and then I'm going to add some extra ones just to give it the full length. And that means that you can kind of use this same method with any sort of add-ons that you want to add to the carriage. I take this old soldier toy, this like cheap plastic toy you can get at the dollar store. Comes in like a huge bag full of toy soldiers. I take that and I start ripping it apart, and this will serve as the base for my cannon. But I want to make it look a bit more ancient, magical, a bit less futuristic and modern. I also want it to be able to turn, and I got all of these craft sticks and these poles, these like wooden dowels that were made to be put together as some sort of craft kit. So I just start cutting those to pieces, and that'll be the hole and the pole that I'll stick together. I then start adding some additional details, like this big pole. I don't know what it would do. It's a magical pole that magically targets where you want to shoot. And then some pieces of cardstock cut to 1/4 of an inch, and I just line those along around the edges to make it look like some metal banding that's holding it all together. I stick a little pole in the side, and this will be the handle that you pull on to move the cannon left and right. After trimming down the edges of the little platform, so that way it is nicely 3 inches by 3 inches, I'm going to stick down that little hole that we built out of popsicle sticks, as well as stick in the giant piece of dowel that will hold the entire thing together. I use a hefty amount of hot glue here, and even some super glue, because there's not a lot of space to hold this. There's not a lot of things for it to stick onto, just kind of an empty void. So the hot glue is sticking to the hot glue, and the super glue is there just to make sure it doesn't wiggle around. I then add even more of that spackle into that little recessed area as well. I use some silver spray paint on the underside as well as the giant cannon, and then just cover that in some black wash to get it all grimy and dirty. I got a bunch of these steampunky cogs already painted from Amazon, and these look really great, so I'm just going to stick them on to the cannon after it's been painted. And this makes it look more like a medieval steampunky sort of cannon. And then onto the wooden pieces of the train carriages, I'm just going to paint a burnt sienna, and then come through with a dry brush of a much brighter raw sienna. Just raw sienna mixed with white. And that gives the wood a really nice aged and worn look. And at this point, it's getting really cold, so I go out and I start spray painting the foam pieces for the carriage green and use my heat gun to dry it fast. And when it's nice and dry, I pick out all of those wooden details again with a burnt sienna. And there we have some really nice, quick, cheap, easy train carriages that are modular as well. Everything you could possibly want. And even a siege cannon to go along with it, so you can destroy the mighty tower. I might come in later and add little hooks, that way the train can move together as one piece. But for now, I left it out. That way I can easily move it around and don't need to worry about connecting and disconnecting things, because I can see that being a hassle in the future. And here you can see how I added on some of those steampunky gears to the doors later on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week, because I think we're going to need something for these trains to ride along.